Hey everyone, welcome back. All right, so now what we're going to focus on is we're going to do some layering with the plaster. And to do that, it's very simple. In the previous video, we saved a plane, like an unsculpted plane, and we're going to go ahead and use this for the plaster. So you can already see, right, where this plane and doing the layering, it's just like it's so useful to do because you can literally add anything you want on it and just keep enhancing the layering of a tiling sculpt. So let's go ahead and I'm actually going to duplicate it because I think what I'll do is I might do like another layer of plaster on top of this, but we'll see. So now that we have that duplicated, this one's hidden, that's good. Let's go ahead and we'll bring it up in front of the bricks. Oh, and I should mention too. So this right here, like this is a good quality sculpt that you could just start using this, right? Like this could be like a base tiling texture that you can use. So this is another thing that's powerful about this method is you could save an extra layer, an extra plane, and you could sculpt different variations of grout. And like maybe the grout isn't as prominent, and you want the bricks to really stand out more, right? Like that's something you could do. You could save that out as one texture. You could do one that's, more like this that we just did and save that out. And then you could even do like just a pure plaster, do a tiling texture of a plaster. So you could kind of do all the stages, right, of a wall. So you could do a fully plastered wall. Then you could do sort of like a damaged plaster, which is what we're going to do. And then you could do like you know, a grout brick texture, and so just like go through the stages of destruction of a wall. And that would be really awesome because that would be textures you could use in a game and you could blend those together with like vertex painting. So just something to keep in mind, like this is where the power of using ZBrush really starts to shine. So let's go ahead and we'll move this forward. Okay, something like that, something like fairly close because we'll do something like not quite touching it, but probably something like right here. All right, we'll go ahead and give this some subdivisions. Okay, so for the plaster, it's not too tricky. You can kind of freestyle this if you want. Let's go ahead and look at some of the reference really quick here. So I know like there's a lot of micro detail going on in here. I really like this though. I love the chipping that's going on and sort of the layering. This has some paint left over, and then it kind of goes into, the really chipped and worn plaster. And that's something that we can do, and we're going to do that. So we don't really want to focus too much on all of this really refined detail because that'll come later. You could even do that inside of Substance Painter if you want. What we're going to focus on is sort of like the large shapes. They're kind of hard to see, but in general with plaster, um, like this, it's fairly flat. So there's not a lot of, noise going on in there at the start. And so I'll kind of show you my way of getting some pretty convincing looking plaster. And one of the ways that we do that is I'm going to go ahead and take the clay buildup. I'm going to turn off actually we'll just, I usually use a square alpha, so we'll just use that. Let's turn the intensity down, making sure all of our wrap mode is set to 1 on all of our brushes. And let's just go ahead and we'll just make some marks, right? Just make some marks. Dirty up the canvas. Okay. Um, and this is just to get us started. Next, what we can do is we'll use the H polish brush, which is BHP. And let's see, maybe we'll use a square alpha. Let's see. Make sure the wrap mode's on. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just create some large, dents and divots in here. And I'm going to kind of smooth some of this out. The key here, and really think about this, it's really about subtlety. And I'm actually, let's see, maybe I'll turn the intensity down quite a bit. I'm going to turn the alpha off because we actually don't want that. We don't want the square marks. And be, be careful with this part. Don't go too crazy with it. We don't need like the rest of the sculpt beneath the bricks and the grout are very sort of noisy. They have a lot of high frequency detail. So with the plaster, like don't be too heavy-handed with this. Just really start to smooth it out. And I'm just kind of looking for, how the light's catching the surface. Like I want that sort of, just like some big sort of shapes showing through in the light. You can kind of see that. Just like this. Next, I'm going to switch to the orb flatten brush that we've been using. And I'm just going to go ahead and just make a mark and test this out. That's not too bad. I don't mind the alpha on this brush. So using variations of Alt, pushing in and out, just going to kind of go through here. Just sort of hit the surface. I'm just tapping my brush too, by the way. I'm not, holding it down for very long. Let's go ahead and turn the alpha off for a little bit. So you can see what this is doing. It's just sort of like adding some large micro shapes in a way. Oh, and I realized that my wrap mode was actually turned off. So we're going to step back. See? I make mistakes all the time. Not a big deal. Okay, so it kind of starts to get there a little bit, but if we want to go ahead and speed this up, let's start to introduce a little bit more detail. Danny Carlone's brushes, he does have a plaster noise, which is awesome, very useful. So we can go ahead and let's lay that down. Now the default intensity is probably too much, so let's just drag that down a bit, just like that. I'm just going to kind of drag it around a little bit on the canvas here. And then from there, let's go ahead and we'll go back to our orb flatten. And we'll start to, erase some of that back. And I'm going to actually put the alpha back on. So if you can kind of see what I'm doing here, right? I'm just sort of being pretty methodical about how I'm placing down all my brush work. And you'll see I'll end up coming back through and doing a second pass on the plaster because, well, you'll see why. Make a larger brush. Okay, so that's getting kind of convincing, I guess, right? It's not too bad. Get some cool little shapes in there. So to do the damage, it's very fun, very simple. There's a couple of ways you could do it. One way is you could just use a brush that's strong enough and push your way straight through the mesh. So if I have the clay build up and I hold Alt, I kind of just like dig through a little bit. And what you're doing is you're just pushing like a plane back into space, and then you're revealing, the brick underneath, which is really cool. Now let's say like, so we'll go ahead and make this mark here. Let's say like we're happy with this, right? You can see it's kind of hard because you get like this like weird sort of transition between the brick and the plaster, like the clean plaster. Whereas in the sculpt, or I'm sorry, in the reference, you see how it's like very sharp and cut off. And then not only that, but you have all of these little chips and pieces that you can get. So let's go ahead and we'll try to get that down. And to sort of make it like a harsher fall off, let's use the trim smooth border and I'm going to hold Alt. Just go right over the surface, bigger size brush, just sort of go over it and go back and forth. So you see how that kind of just like closes the gap up a little bit? Now, if you make your brush even bigger, you can kind of like, basically it will push the clay back up, if that makes sense. So you can, in theory, you'll get better results if you use a bigger brush versus a small brush like this. It's kind of hard to pull that detail, make it flat again. So we can do the reverse. So once we go back in through here and kind of clean this up a bit, you can even come back in with your orb flatten, and you can just kind of clean up the sides here. So you can see why, like, don't spend too much time on the plaster, right? We go over it a bunch more. So just like this. What's cool about this is that you could use the M, what is this? What's it called again? You can use the MRGBZ grabber, and like if I just show you really quick here, you could just do this, and boom, you can turn this into an alpha stamp, and you can stamp this around. So this is another method of, I guess another cool thing about using ZBrush for doing your tiling sculpts. Just like a cool little tip. Let's go ahead and get the trim smooth border. So we can do the reverse. So now that we kind of brought the sculpt back in, we can go back and start to sculpt out with a small brush and just kind of go through. I found that you can use the trim smooth border for this, but I don't think it's powerful enough to really, punch this stuff. So we can use the mallet fast brush for this, because this kind of like, it's a pretty intense brush, and you'll see like if I just go through and start to dig into this a bit more. See how it starts to add that like kind of chipping effect? Go through here a bit, and we can actually, let's increase the topology. Sort of just break up that edge a bit more. So this is sort of like the manual way to do it. If you don't want to use alphas for it, but I like using alpha brushes because they just speed up your workflow, and typically I don't have the time to sit here and just sculpt this stuff away. So this is one way to do it. The other way would basically be to use an alpha that sort of works on flat surfaces. So let's try to use let's see, where'd it go? The plaster. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the plaster brush. Let's see if we can just come in here. Maybe use using Alt. Actually, let's turn the intensity up. Even more. I mean, even something like this could work, right, on those edges. It kind of works. It's not bad. And then always, you can go through and just start to erase some of this. Come back in. Okay. So what we could do next is let's try to get some of this, like another additional layer, right? Where this is like the plaster that's still in there, or it's like some sort of grout. Um, it's like a secondary, layer to the plaster. So what we could do is, well, first, before I actually do that, I'm gonna go ahead and start to do a little like time lapse, and I'm gonna kind of sculpt out more sections of the plaster and get this to a good spot. Then we'll come in with an additional layer. All right, so I think that'll do for like the top section of the plaster. I just tried to get something that was a little, unique. And you can see that I just went through and just did the same things that we talked about, right? Using the trim smooth border brush and sort of coming back in on top and kind of like flattening out a little bit more. Um, I think that worked out pretty nicely. So let's go ahead and get like our last layer in here, which is basically another plaster layer. So let's go ahead and we'll take our tile plane. I'm just going to duplicate it again. I like to just always save one. And if you accidentally, sculpt on top of this, don't worry about it. You can just re-import the subtool again that I'll be giving you, the tile plane. You can just re-import it and it'll be good. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll drag this guy up here and we'll drag it up something like right up here, maybe a little bit lower. So this is sort of just acting as like a second plaster layer. So what I like to do is to just go ahead and I'll go through, give it some subdivisions, and let's just get our clay buildup. We'll just go through and just sort of start to sculpt out some of this. So you can just see like it's so cool. This is like my favorite part just because um, it's so fun to mess with the layering inside here. I'm a big fan, big fan. All right. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same process of, coming in here, sculpting on top. Let's go ahead and get the trim smooth border brush back. And we'll just sort of go through and push some of this back here. And if you want to bring some of this back up, you can just take the move brush, and just kind of pull this up. Which makes me wonder how far I sculpted back. But you can always do this and then take this trim smooth border brush and really just, bring it back. It's obviously it's a little bit too much. Sculpt that back down. Now, obviously, we don't have to have this secondary layer, pop up everywhere. So let's go through and just kind of erase some of it, just like this. Right, so you just kind of give the same treatment that we did on this top layer here. And that's pretty much it. That's, um, you know, the method of using multiple layers inside of ZBrush and being able to sculpt on top of them to create a lot of depth and dimension to it, which I think is just like it's so cool, right? Like this is right, like it's really cool. You can add as many layers as you want. Like if you wanted to add another plaster layer, you don't want to go too crazy with it because I think what tends to happen is you could start to muddy up the tiling texture, um, and you don't necessarily want that. But you can think of a lot of different applications for this. You could do like stones with vines or pebbles, like or the big one that I've done before is like doing rubble piles, right? Where you can just kind of keep adding layer on top of layer and just making it everything sit on top of one another. So it's really useful. But before I go ahead and end it here, what I want to show is one last thing for the plaster, and just to add, a little bit of you know, interest, I guess. And I think part of that is adding in some cracks. So, obviously, in the past I mentioned like I don't actually know where I got all my crack brushes, but again, you can find them literally anywhere. You could probably just type in ZBrush crack brushes and pull up a lot of different ones. So this is basically what I would do is I would just kind of add in, let's go ahead and get that wrap mode on. I'd add in some cracks just to start to age this a bit more and just like convince you even more that, it's old, it's damaged. We'll just kind of go through. You could even add like you can add whatever you want on top of this, right? Like you could add some holes in here, like it's flaking away, which is kind of cool. I wouldn't go super overboard with detailing this myself, just because there is a lot going on here, and I think anything you can do to help try to, um, you know, sell what's going on without overselling it, right? Like just having damaged plaster is enough to tell me that this thing's probably old. We don't necessarily have to go in, you know, super crazy with it, um, or like, beat someone over the head the fact that this is old plaster or an old plaster wall. But that's basically it. But I'm going to go ahead and keep sculpting this and using the same tips and tricks that I've been, talking with you guys about. And then I will show the finished result at the end. So as you can see, I have a completed sculpt here. And what I did was, basically just going through with the same techniques that I showed you and, just really tried to make this plaster look convincing by using a trim smooth border brush, going through and sharpening the edges up and really utilizing, the layers the best I can. So if I start to like pull this apart, you can see like I have obviously this top layer that I have of the plaster. And then if I go ahead and click this, here's sort of the second layer. And what I could do is actually kind of colorize this so you can kind of see what's going on here. Let's turn this like a red color. And let's go ahead and turn this like a blue color. Actually, you should see that right there. And you can see how the layering is working, right? Like it just kind of seamlessly fits right into the sculpt. So that about wraps up this tutorial. I hope that this was really helpful for all of you to sort of start to understand the power of using multiple layers inside of ZBrush. But this is my approach to sculpting any tiling textures that I do when I'm inside here. Um, And it's like one of my absolute favorite tools because it just gets this really like you get a really sculptural look and it gets like really, thick and chunky kind of shapes going on, which is really awesome. All right, so thank you guys again. You're awesome. I can't wait to make more videos for you. I hope you really enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.